Hello there, and thank you for coming to this second round of Bluesound Professional webinar. And we're going to be talking about what's new with us this summer, or winter if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But anyway, the middle of 2023. So I'm joined here by Ross Evelyn, our product manager. Hi there, Ross.
Hello.
And we're going to be going over some new products, but first of all, I want to go over some stuff that some of you will have heard before, and I apologize if I'm repeating myself, but I think it bears repetition. And the first thing, before I go over anything at all, let me tell you that as you'll see, you've got a GoToWebinar control panel. Most of you have probably used GoToWebinar before. You'll also see there's a question section in that control panel. If you have any questions for us, please just note them down in that questions panel. I'll be able to see them come in, and if I miss them, Ross will be able to see them come in. And we'll either answer them when you ask them, we'll answer them when we were going to get to that point, if we were going to get to it anyway. Or failing all of that, we'll ask them at the end when there'll be a general Q&A session. So with that, let's get on to Bluesound Professional in general, and who are we and why is that important? I always want to remind people of our elevator pitch because it was true at the beginning and it's true still. We're the world's first and still only purpose-designed complete range of streaming audio hardware for use specifically in commercial spaces. There are other music player boxes that are they're used in commercial spaces, and there's other streaming ecosystems for residential use, but there's not a complete ecosystem specifically designed for use in commercial installations. And that's why we founded the company, getting on for 5 years ago now, and it was true then, it's still true now. So we're really post-COVID now building up momentum, especially in North America. And I want to go through some of the lessons we've learned and hope that that will help you in your efforts to do more business with our equipment. And the first thing I want to talk about is talking to AV consultants. So one of the things that I did early on in the life of the company is started to talk to our better known AV consultants, particularly in the US. And I asked them a really simple question. What do you do when you need music in one of your specifications? Almost every type of installation, whether it's a corporate install, a government install, a hospitality or retail install, healthcare install, basically anything, they probably need background music somewhere. As Craig, our North American sales manager, would say, if there's a speaker in the system, they're probably going to be playing music at least part of the time. And I ask consultants, what do you do when you need a background music source? And their usual answer to me is, we put music supplied by customer. And at that point, I say to them, so you spend all that time designing an audio system, all of your skill designing an audio system, and you have the best processing, best amplification, the best speakers, you design a great fit for purpose system, and you let your customer put any old garbage in the front. As you know, if you put garbage in, you're going to get garbage out louder out of the other end of the system. I say, why did you do that? And they usually say to me, well, what's the option? And I point them to one of our players, either the 1 or the 4 zone player, and say, this is your option. And they usually say to me, oh, I see, okay. And then what we start to see is specs coming out. And so if you have a spec and they decide that they want a music player, one way of speccing a system might be a really generic spec with shall have music streaming player, nothing more than that. A very common type of spec would be shall have streaming music player, can be model A, B, C, or approved alternative. So as an integrator, you can put in model A, model B, model C, or if you don't have access to them or prefer model D, you can go to the consultant and ask them for an exception. As a manufacturer, the holy grail for us is to see specs saying, shall have a music streamer, shall be model A with no approved alternative. And that's what we're seeing, particularly in North America with consultant specs, simply because we have no competition. And so this has led to our gear being spec'd in all sorts of applications, from the US Senate to 6 or 7 really big stadiums, including the Staples Center, the Miami Dolphins, the New York Mets, places like Carnegie Hall, hundreds of corporate specs, museums everywhere, all sorts of types of installations. And when talking about that, we then think about who we sell to, what type of integrators we sell to. And certainly in the US, the first category of those integrators is what I call the big boys. So in the US, 80% of all AV installations are done by the top 10 integrators. The really big ones are AVI SPL, diversified AVI systems. Little smaller would be Ford AV, Electrosonic, Conference Tech, people like that. All of those top 10 are using our gear. And the usual reason they're using our gear is that they saw a spec that says something like, shall have Bluesound Professional B400S 4-zone music streamer with no approved alternative. And they'll call us up and they will say, well, we need one of these B400Ss. What are they? What's our price? And when can we get one? And we'll give them the answer to that. And then we'll say, well, can we come in and explain to you what we do? And they usually say, sure, why not? And we do it. And then they use us in that spec, and they start to use us in other jobs that they're doing themselves, design build jobs. And what usually happens is we get one branch of, say, AVI SPL or AVI systems, and then we scale out to other branches. And now I think it's true to say that with AVI SPL, they're probably our biggest customer in the world, including distribution. So that's, pardon me, the first type of integrator we sell to. Hang on, I'll just take a quick drink. The second type of integrator are the specialists. These are the guys that only do hospitality and retail. And in the US, the big ones are PTG, Promotion Tech, Dynamic Media, Essential Communications, Waves. In England, it's people like Image Sound and Perfect Octave. In Scandinavia, it's Apletify. And there are a number of these specialists. Now, when a normal integrator puts a music streamer in, they will tell the customer to sign up to a music service and then put in their credentials. And we have some partner programs with some of the music, business music services, so that integrators can get a commission on that. But where you really make money is if you resell music service licenses. So for example, in the US, PTG are the resellers for Sound Machine and Custom Channels. So they buy licenses from Sound Machine and Custom Channels, and they resell them on to the customer. And the customer pays them, and they pay the music service. Dynamic Media do the same thing for Sirius XM for Business and Soundtrack Your Brand. Essential Communications use Soundtrack Your Brand and Sound Machine. So these are the real specialists. They do the chains of restaurants and shops and that sort of thing. They're our kind of spirit animals, if you like, and we've been slower getting to them than the big boys, but we're definitely getting to them now. And then the third category is the local guys. So Here in Portland, some of you will have heard me talk about a customer called Ohm Systems. It's a little integrator. They have 3 or 4 staff. They buy from us almost every week. And they're doing the one-off restaurants here in Portland, Oregon, or winery tasting rooms, or distribution centers, or warehouses for firms making car baby seats, or all sorts of little installations around town. And every town's got 1, 2, 3, 4 of those. And it's simply a question of getting around and getting to those people. So those are the types of integrators we sell to, particularly in North America. For example, with AVI SPL, we're also selling to them in the UK, in EMEA, in the Middle East, in Hong Kong. So it's scaling globally. Something I just mentioned, and I'll touch on a little more now, is music services. So the important thing to remember about Bluesound Professional and our operating system Bluos is that we're like Switzerland. We don't only support one music service, we support lots of music services. And this is really important because in the residential space, music services, the landscape's pretty much quietened down now. It's pretty set with Apple, Spotify, and Amazon as your big 3 players, Tidal as your musician's friend, Cool Service, Cobuzz, Deezer, Amazon HD as your high-res audiophile services, and then some specialist services. That's pretty settled. In the business world, traditionally, Mood Media has been the supplier to big multinational clients, but they're a download service. They really haven't made the transition to streaming very elegantly yet. So they're kind of like iTunes in the world of Spotify, or Blockbuster Video in the world of Netflix. And people are positioning to be like the streaming mood alternative or the Spotify for business. But there's no market leaders at the moment. So we support multiple music services. And as a customer, you want us to support multiple music services, because if you buy a box that's tied to a music service this year, and a great new music service comes out next year, or even next month or next week, and you say, oh, I really want to change to that one, you're locked in with your hardware. With us, you can simply switch out, log out of one music service, log into another music service, and off you go. So when talking about music services, we support 5 business music services. One of them, I think a lot of you are from Australia, and one of them is Australian, Cusick. We do some very big installations, rollouts with them. We did last year 800 plus Coles Express convenience stores and gas stations across Australia. We're doing a ton of 7-Eleven stores in North America with them. We're doing some Hungry Jacks in Australia with them. They're a great music service for big chains. Sound Machine is a really good music service for a general purpose business music customer, a restaurant, a bar, a small chain, that sort of thing. Available globally. Unfortunately, Tunify is only available currently in Europe. They're looking to expand out of Europe, and Custom Channels and SiriusXM for Business are only available in North America. So in Asia, Australia and Asia, Sound Machine, Cusick are your choices. These business music services are both legal to play in commercial spaces, because lots of people don't realize that there's no legal way to play Spotify or Tidal or Apple or Amazon or anything like that in a commercial music space, in a public space. Even if you have your One Music PRO subscription in Australia, you still can't play Spotify because the content isn't licensed for public use. In addition to being legal, these services have things like scheduling, messaging, enterprise control. Cusick particularly does cloud-based algorithmic tweaking of playlists based on sensor input from in-stores. They do a ton of stuff that Spotify and Tidal and Apple and people don't do. Going on from that, you can actually also play as long as you have your One Music subscription, internet radio, just the same as you can play FM radio. And TuneIn and radio.com are good aggregators of radio stations. Radio Paradise, iHeart, and Calm have their own native apps. Radio Paradise has a really good high-res service as well. They're legal as well. So all of those above those two lines are legal in commercial spaces. Now, lots of people say, I kind of don't care. I want to make my own playlists. I feel comfortable with a residential service. I'm probably not going to get caught, even though it's technically illegal, and they're probably right. They probably won't get caught. If you are going to use a residential service, I would say, please use Tidal. Tidal is deeply cool. It pays the musicians the most per stream. It has great initiatives to support emerging musicians. It's a great music service. It has MQA. It now supports high-res FLAC as well as CD quality. So it's a really good, if I was choosing just one residential service, I'd choose Tidal. We also support, a ton of other ones. Some highly specialized, like the Neil Young Archives. Some, dedicated to live concerts like Nugs and LiveX Live. Idagio is a classical music service. We support a wide range of music services. And you can use any of those services within the Bluesound Professional ecosystem. We're also doing integrations with some new partners. There's nothing coming in the immediate future, but in the medium-term future, we have a couple of exciting new partners coming along. So I'm hoping that you're going to be typing in any questions about music services and that sort of thing as we go. I don't see any questions at the moment. So I'm going to go on and talk about our basic architecture. Again, this is a refresher. I'm not going to spend long on it, but you can use our gear as streamers, just front end, +4 dBu balanced audio output going into any standard system, into a DSP or amplifiers, because they already have DSP in them, these players. They're 21st century CD players. You can retrofit them into existing systems. Ken asks, what about Soundtrack Your Brand? It seems to be associated with Spotify. Well, we are currently in an integration process with Soundtrack Your Brand. It's a fairly long integration because there's quite a deep integration, and they're also changing their platform to be more like some of the other business music services, because they can't currently support things like messaging. So we have to wait till a new platform comes out, and then we will be integrating with that. As far as it seems to be associated with Spotify, you're technically correct, but not in the same way as most people think it is. So Spotify do not own Soundtrack Your Brand. When Soundtrack Your Brand, which like Spotify is Swedish, and was started by two guys, Ola and Andreas, one of whom was an early Spotify employee, the other of whom started Beats Music. When they started the company, they actually called it Spotify for Business because they were using a Spotify backend library. As they expanded out of Scandinavia, Spotify didn't want to do the negotiations with the record companies for commercial licenses all over the world. So so those guys, Ola and Andreas and their team, said, okay, we'll build our own backend library. And so they stopped using the Spotify library. They have their own backend library, and they renamed the company Soundtrack Your Brand. And it is true that Spotify do have an investment in Soundtrack Your Brand, but it's not a majority investment. So that's the background. That's one of the music services that we're currently in the middle of an integration with. As I say, we're kind of waiting for them to update their platform, because they're doing that anyway to get some functionality, some extra functionality, and it would be pointless us integrating with them now, because we'd only have to do a second integration when they have their new platform. Anyway, getting back to the brand architecture, the B100S is a 1-zone streamer. B400S is a 4-zone streamer, so you can do 4 independent music streams to different zones from one box. You can go further than that and add amplifiers to the streamers and the B170S is doing very well at the moment. That's a music streamer plus both a low impedance amplifier and a 1700 volt output option. So that's everything you need for a music system apart from loudspeakers in a box. The 160S is the same, except low impedance only. The A860 is an 8-channel amplifier without streamer, which usually connects to the B400S. What more and more people are doing, though, is using our speakers. And the reason they're doing that is because the speakers have the streamers and the amps in them. They're the whole music system in a box. So, for example, if in Australia, if you go to a Coles Express, you'll see in a gas station, you'll see 2 or 3 BSP200s, which are PoE powered little speakers, sound great, in the Coles Express. That sound system literally has 2 or 3 speakers, a PoE plus Ethernet switch, and that's the whole sound system. There's no rack anywhere, there's no player anywhere. It's all built into the speakers. Same thing with the 500 and 1000. They are IP65 rated, so they can be used outside as well as inside. If we're using them outside some of the 711s at the moment in the US. And they're also powered by PoE Plus or PoE++. We also have a subwoofer called the BSW 150. It goes down to 22 Hertz, gives a nice bottom end to any of the speakers. You can also use it with other people's speakers, with our streamer amplifiers, or even with our streamers going into an otherwise retrofit sound system, just to add a bit more bottom end. And now I'm going to come to the bit that all of you have been waiting for me to talk about, which is the new stuff. So we have just launched a active network ceiling speaker called the BCS 300. So this is very much like the BSP 200, that little speaker that's used in Coles Express, but in a different form factor. This is a ceiling mount speaker, as you can see. It has the same 3.5-inch low frequency and 1-inch high frequency driver as in the BSP 200, but instead of the configuration in the BSP 200, in this speaker, the BCS 300, they're dual concentric. It's like the 200, PoE plus powered. You can see an RJ45 on the back can. Like the BSP 200, it'll go to 102 dB, 1 meter C weighted. It has a great 140-degree conical dispersion. So it's a very wide dispersion speaker to allow you to really produce these sound clouds without hotspots. So people walking through a space don't get particular hotspots. And I'm going to come onto that a bit more detail later on. It has a plenum-rated back box, and I'm going to come on to that in a little more detail later on. And so that is the networked active ceiling speaker. It has a passive brother called the BCS 200. The same drivers, it can be used low impedance or 70 or 100 volt. It has a front screw for tapping the power rating when it's used at constant voltage or switching it to low impedance. This is a prototype you can see on the photo, so it doesn't have its screen printing on, but it'll have screen printing, so you can tell where you're tapping it to. It has the same 140-degree conical dispersion, and it's also plenum rated. So you can have the ceiling speaker in either passive form with the pluggable Phoenix connector, and you can see 4 connectors there because it's got an in and an out, so you can daisy chain them, particularly if you're running 70 or 100 volt systems, or you can have it in active form, the BCS 300. Now I'm going to get on to grills. Both of these speakers come as standard with a white round magnetic grill, but you can also order from us as a spare part a black grill and either a black or a white square grill. and they're all magnetically attached. So taking one off, putting another one on is super easy. So as standard, they all come with the white grill. The other 3 grills are optional extras that you can order when you order the speaker, or later if you need to. Likewise, an optional extra is pendant kit to convert the ceiling speaker into a pendant mount speaker. As you can see, they're available in black or white. It's the same kit for the active speaker or the passive speaker. So inside that pendant casing, there are 2 cables. One terminates with an RJ45 if you're using the 300 active, and the other one terminates with a pluggable Phoenix connector that you can use if you're using it, putting in the passive BCS 250 in it. The black pendant kit includes the grill because you won't have got that with the speaker as standard. The white one is very slightly cheaper and does not include a grill because you got that with your ceiling speaker. So basically you convert a ceiling speaker into a pendant speaker by mounting the ceiling speaker back box and everything into that pendant outer case. So the pendant outer case is not an acoustic case, it is merely cosmetic. It still uses the plenum rated back box as its acoustic enclosure. As you can see at the bottom there, at the top normally, there's a rubber cap. There is an eye hook for the steel mounting cable, which by the way, we don't supply because we don't know what length you want it. But the eye hook's there to allow the connection for it. And on the bottom of this pendant mount case, or at the top, the way it's usually mounted, are both an RJ45 and a pluggable barrier strip socket. So depending on which one you've connected inside, you connect the cable to it on the outside and off you go. And the way they look in installations, it's kind of like this. For the ceiling speaker, below why someone will put a black ceiling speaker on a white ceiling, I'm not really sure. They probably actually do it this way and put the white ceiling mount grill on. And here's how it might look in a restaurant as a pendant mount. And increasingly we're seeing restaurants and bars and workplaces and all sorts of other things having higher ceilings, more industrial look. And in order to not really excite the room by blasting a speaker from up in the ceiling, you can bring your speaker down, as you can see in the picture, to near the people, play it at a much lower level, minimize the bleed through to other areas, and really focus your sound. So we launched these speakers at Infocom, the trade show in Orlando 2 or 3 weeks ago. Here's a picture of our little booth at Infocom. It was crowded all the way through, which is great. We were demoing, as you can see on the left and the right there, both the active and the passive speakers in both ceiling and pendant mount form, and people loved them. I was amazed. I mean, yeah, it's pretty cool us having ceiling and pendant speakers, but I did not expect the amount of adulation that we got, including, in this case, the Best of Show award from Commercial Integrator for the active ceiling speaker. So I want to go into why we made these products. The first reason we made them is that you asked us for them. Integrators all around the world asked us for them. Reps, distributors asked us for them. And we really want our company to be a company that responds to customer requests. We don't want to act like God and say, you're going to get what we think you should have when we think you should have it. We want to know what you want, when you want it. We can't always do it as quickly. In fact, we can never do it as quickly as either you or we would like, but we listen and then we bring out products. That's why we brought out the 1700 volt streamer amplifier, even though we recognize that 1700 volt compromises sound quality somewhat, and we don't really want to do that, but everyone asked for it. Oh, that's an interesting question. IP65 pendant. I don't know. I mean, we haven't talked about making it IP65. I don't think it could be in its current form because the top cap isn't a weatherproof cap in the same way as our BSP 500 and 1000. I've not been asked for IP65 rated pendants. They probably wouldn't have to be 65 rated because they literally hang down from something. So probably there's at least a deck above them or something. Interesting question. I've not been asked that before.
Yeah, we'd have to develop a new top cap for that.
Yeah. Probably not out of the question. Be interested to see whether more people ask us for that.
Yep.
The second reason we did these is particularly for the passive one, we're doing a load of work on biophilic soundscaping in office spaces with a company called Bluesound from England and Austria, and also the furniture company Steelcase. And what we needed in these office environments to do biophilic soundscaping, natural soundscaping, to do mood setting as well as sound masking is a lot of speakers in the space. So it didn't make sense to have a lot of active speakers. It would be very expensive. It would be a lot of networking. We were just talking to Moodsonic today about an installation that would have around about, let me think, around about 4,500 speakers in it, and you wouldn't want those all to be active speakers. But what you do need, particularly with the soundscapes, is a sound cloud. You don't need hotspots because you don't want to walk around the office and hear nature in some places and not in other places. That's not natural. So we work really hard on the dispersion for this particular use case because there's no other speaker on the market that can do that. Conventional sound masking speakers don't have this frequency response to accurately replay natural soundscapes. It sounds like natural sound through a transistor radio. And 6 or 8 inch drivers are 2 directional. You get hotspots. And then for the active speakers, with QSIC particularly, we're doing quick service restaurants and convenience stores like Coles Express and 7-Eleven, but they're doing a lot more supermarkets and big white goods stores like Best Buy and things. And those stores are really big. So with our conventional surface mount speakers, we can cover the outside of those spaces, but we can't get to the middle. And that's why we developed ceiling and pendant mount speakers. So we can work with QSIC to do even coverage of even really big supermarkets, hypermarkets, those sorts of things. So that's some of the reasoning behind. The other question that you really want to know is how much they cost and when you can get them. And I'm not going to give you exact answers for either of these. And the reason for that is twofold. On the pricing, we have people here who are distributors, we have people here who are integrators, we have people here who are reps, so they will get different pricing. So if I gave one price, it wouldn't be applicable to the other pricing. What I can tell you though, is that the BCS 300, the active ceiling speaker, is the same price as the BSP 200. So whatever you're paying for a BSP 200 surface mount speaker, you will be paying for a BCS 300, the ceiling mount equivalent of it. And in terms of the passive speaker, the BCS 250, it's very competitive to comparable like 4-inch models from people like Atlas IED, QSC, Bose, JBL. It's got better frequency response, better dispersion, and it's the same price or sometimes lower than those other brands. And then when you add the pendant mount kit, it makes the passive speaker cheaper than any other pendant of similar performance or even better, worse performance. It's very, very cost effective as a pendant mount. Now, when you pendant mount the active speaker, I can't give you an equivalent because there aren't any other active pendant mount speakers, but it's very cost effective. In terms of availability, we had planned to be able to ship them or to have them in stock by the end of November. And we still might be able to, but we have to go through plenum rating. We have to do UL 1480 and UL 2043 testing. And we're not certain that in the current state, the back box is going to pass that testing. We were initially told by our manufacturer that it would. There now seems to be some doubt as to whether it will. And plenum rating is imperative in this range of speakers. So we may have to go back and either partially or totally redesign the back box, and that'll lead to a delay in the ship time of the speakers. So it could be as early as November. It's more likely to be delayed a little. It might be delayed significantly if we have to do a completely new back box. I have another question. How many daisy chains active speakers through Bluos? Well, the active speakers in any case are a point-to-point thing, just like any other PoE product. So you go from a switch to a speaker. If you have 10 speakers, you have a switch with at least 10 ports, and you go from each port of the PoE plus switch to a speaker. The speaker needs, in this case, 30 watts per speaker. So when you're running the active speakers, they're not daisy chained. When you're running 70 or 100 volt speakers in the passive model, they are and can be daisy chained. And that's why you've got the 4 connector Phoenix barrier strip, because 2 of those connectors are in and the other 2 are out. And how many can you daisy chain with 100 volts, say? It depends on what you tap them at. So for example, if you're using a B170S at 100 volts, it'll give you 1 times 100 watt output. Say you tap these speakers at 5 watts, then you can daisy chain 20 together. So you, like any other 100 volt speaker, set the tapping, and then the total output power of the 100 volt amplifier divided by the tapping will give you the number of speakers. But in the active model, it's a star topology, just like any other network thing. Oh, yes, you can definitely have one zone with 20 speakers. With all of our products and all of our speakers, we have 2 ways of grouping within Bluos. One is what I'd call a temporary group, and the other is what I'd call a fixed group. And what you do in that case is, let's say I had 20 ceiling speakers in a restaurant, I would click on one of the ceiling speakers in Bluos, and then go to create fixed group, and then add the other 19 speakers to that first speaker, and then they become a group of 20 speakers. I can set the relative levels of the speakers. So if I have quiet areas and loud areas in my restaurant, I can set, some speakers to output less than the other speakers, but the customer has one volume control, which is an overall volume control of those 20 speakers. Those 20 speakers are all playing the same thing. They're all time aligned. What actually happens when you group, either temporarily or in fixed groups, is the first speaker you click on becomes the primary, and that takes in the music service or the local content or whatever you're streaming, and then it streams that content and time clock to the other 19 speakers, which become secondary speakers in that environment. So they act as 20 speakers, all playing the same thing, all time aligned. Or if you have one zone with 20 speakers, you can select, and you want to stereo, you can select some of them to be right speakers and some of them to be left speakers, either 10 right or 10 left, or 8 right and 12 left, or you can select them to be summed left and right. So if you have 20 speakers in a zone, you can run it mono, you can run it stereo, you can select which ones are right, which ones are left, what the offset volume is for all of the speakers. It's incredibly flexible, easy to do, and easy to control afterwards. Yes, there is a limit on how many you can do. The limit is 64 in one subnet. So our limit of how many devices can be on one subnet, whether they're grouped together or they're running on separate zones, is 64. In some of the big stadiums we're doing one of the stadiums, the Prudential Center, has almost 150 zones, and those zones have multiple speakers. So we're actually running multiple subnets in different parts of that stadium, and we have a subnet traversal utility, so the AV manager can see all 150 zones. But each subnet has a maximum of 64 devices on that subnet. Great questions. Any last questions? That's all the content I have for you. I like to usually in my webinars give music recommendations, and I'm going to give another one this time. My music taste is fairly quirky, as Jarek will know, Kerry will know. My hot recommendation at the moment is Christine and the Queen's new triple album. It's called Paranoia, Angels, True Love, and it'll put you through an emotional ringer. It's amazing. Let's see, any more last questions? You can contact me at gharrison@lenbrook.com, Ross, who's a much better bet for technical questions, at Evelyn at lenbrook.com. Craig's down there as well. He's more for North American inquiries. So if any of you happen to be in North America and just listening in the evening your time, there's Craig's email address. I'm just
got another question there, Graham.
The venue has 4 output zones with multiple speakers, and as well as music, wants to play 2. Yes, pretty much. If you can have certainly 4 output zones, you can have up to 64 on a subnet, so that's no problem. The output zones can have multiple speakers as long as you don't have more than 64 devices in total. So let's say you've got output zone 1 with 6 speakers, and output zone 2 with 4 speakers, and output zone 3 with 10 speakers, and output zone 4 with 6 speakers again, you're going to be fine. For satellite TV boxes to be routable anywhere, we have a product called the Hub, which is a input interface device. And so each TV box would go into a hub. That hub is available to any device on the network. And you have a hub has 5 different inputs: a analog line input, an analog phono input, so you can plug a turntable directly into a hub, 3 digital inputs: optical, coax, and HDMI eARC. So probably from a satellite TV box, you'd come out HDMI eARC. You could even come out of your TV HDMI eARC and into the hub that way, and then you can play that signal anywhere in the venue. Microphones, the hub doesn't have a mic input, but so you'd have to go through a mic preamp to get it up to line level, and then it would be available anywhere through the hub. And a hub can have one of the digital inputs and one of the analog inputs simultaneously available to any of the zones. So, for example, in this instance, you'd have 4 zones with however many speakers. You'd have 3 hubs, 1 for each satellite box, and the 2 mics would be boosted to line level with a preamp, and they go into the line input of 2 of the 3 hubs. And all 5 of those inputs, the 3 satellite boxes and the 2 mics, can be routed anywhere in the facility. Great question again. I'm actually doing 2 systems very similar to that right now. One a hotel in the Middle East, and the other one a restaurant here in North America. So that's a very common use case. Thank you, Carrie, and Ken, and Amado for your questions. Any last questions before I go and have a glass of wine? because it's 7 o'clock in the evening now, nearly. All right, well, you know how to get to us. Hopefully you're excited by these products too. And as soon as we have, we'll be sending detailed pricing through to Amber in Australia, to Connected Media in New Zealand tomorrow. So you'll be able to get your local pricing from them. Anyone else, I don't know who else is on the call, but any of our other distributors, C-Power in Taiwan, Simon in Thailand, you'll be getting the pricing again tomorrow. So anyone else who's there from any other country, I don't know when we'll have exact availability, because I'm not exactly sure when the final plenum rating test, UL testing, will be done. As soon as we have confirmed the availability dates, we'll be getting those to you literally as soon as we can. So thanks a lot for your time, as always, and have a great rest of your day. I'm not sure what time of the day it is. I think it's earlier in the day for you guys than it is for me. And see you soon. Cheers.